Order. We have a very full agenda today. Welcome to meeting number 31 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting is webcast and is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted by the committee on Friday, March the 12th, 2021, the committee will resume its study of Canada's exports of environmental and clean technology goods and services. Before us today as witnesses, we have Foresight Clean Tech Accelerator Center, Jeanette Jackson, Chief Executive Officer. From Forest Products Association of Canada, we have Kate Lindsay, Senior Vice President, Sustainability and Environmental Partnerships, and Mahima Sharma, Director, Environment, Innovation and Mill Regulations. Ms. Jackson, you have the floor, please. Ms. Jackson?
Maybe we can start with the second one on the list because I think Ms. Jackson has to connect her mic on her computer. So
all right, then we'll go
maybe
to
we can
Ms.
go
Lindsay.
to
Ms. Lindsay, we turn the floor over to you then, please.
It'll be my colleague, Mahima Sharma, starting off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So thank you. My name is Mahima Sharma, and I am the Director of Environment, Innovation and Mill Regulations at the Forest Products Association. I am here today with my colleague, Kate Lindsay, FPAC Senior Vice President. FPAC represents Canada's wood, pulp, paper, and wood fiber-based bioproduct manufacturers. We're an $80 billion industry, directly employing 230,000 Canadians and supporting another 600,000 Canadian families indirectly in 600 communities. FPAC sees opportunity for our sector to be a solutions provider in supporting the federal government's goals for a green economic recovery. As we map the path to net zero carbon by 2050, the sector continues to pursue opportunities towards next generation biorefinery capabilities and the development of new biosourced products for use here in Canada and also for global export, with the US being a more immediate export market. The following are two great examples of clean technology and product development going on in Canada. Arbios Biotech, a joint venture between Licella and the integrated forest products company Canfor Pulp in Prince George, British Columbia, converts end-of-life wood and biomass into biocrude oil. Earlier this week, this joint venture announced a new global alliance with Shell Catalysts and Technology, which provides the capability to upgrade biocrude into next-generation biofuels and biochemicals, such as transportation fuels for heavy-duty vehicles and aviation in one continuous, efficient process. One of our proudest moments through this pandemic, with the support of Natural Resources Canada and Canadian scientists and researchers at FP Innovations, has been the development of a biodegradable non-medical mask from what would have otherwise been wood waste, a Canadian innovation and first of its kind in the world. Turning wood residues into low-carbon, value-added products such as face masks is another way Canada's forest product sector can help us power green recovery while supporting the Canadian government's efforts to reduce single-use plastics. These first-in-kind technologies and innovative solutions offer global solutions from Canada's forest product sector. These are just a few examples that can further enhance the Made in Canada brand with the potential to export clean technology and bioproducts on a global scale. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Kate Lindsay.
Thank you, Mahima. I will provide just one more example of a positive, disruptive, clean technology product gaining momentum here in Canada, and that is mass timber and tall wood buildings. In addition to societal benefits of using wood, mass timber provides enhanced benefits of carbon storage, displacement of more emission-intensive building materials, as well as showcasing the innovative design aspects of wood. Canada now has a number of companies that play a role in the global mass timber construction space, with facilities located in Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia currently. As an example, Quebec's Nordic Structures recently supplied the glulam beams and cross-laminated timber, or CLT, for a college being built in Houston, Texas. The wood for the prefabricated beams and CLT panels was grown in northern Quebec, manufactured in Montreal, and sent to Houston by rail to lower the transportation greenhouse gas emissions. This is just one example where Canadian innovation and manufacturing, as well as integrated supply chains, are allowing Canada to supply these excellent carbon sequestering products to the world. We see the recent US-Canada Greening Government Initiative as a great example where forest products, both wood construction and the bio-based products my colleague spoke of, can contribute to positive changes through the value chain. Other areas where the government can show support to advance these opportunities include, first, recognizing that Canada's forest products sector is a key contributor to a global low-carbon economy with great potential to further develop the bioeconomy and export market. Second, that the federal government recognize and promote Canada's world-leading forest management practices with global customers and other governments. This would avoid any unnecessary and additional regulatory requirements that are creating confusion and challenging investment climate. And finally, some key policy and programmatic areas, including modernized building codes, procurement strategies that recognize low carbon products, ensuring that government funding programs are readily accessible across the sector, and reliable transportation and supply chain networks. We want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. We look forward to answering any questions and following up with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. On to Ms. Jackson, please.
Good morning. I'm assuming everyone can hear me this time?
Right now, it's fine.
Glorious. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I wish to acknowledge that the lands on which our office is located are part of the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Tsawwassen nations. Foresight is Canada's clean tech ecosystem accelerator. We bring together partners to identify, commercialize, and adopt the clean technologies needed to support a global transition to a green economy. The innovation community is the heart of everything that we do, supported by our partners in industry, academia, government, and of course, the investment community. Our whole mandate is to position Canada as a global leader in clean tech innovation through programmings and relevant initiatives. I'd like to start with a few statements and applaud the efforts to position Canada as this global leader. To expand clean tech innovation and adoption, we need to better connect Canadian clean tech companies to global markets and investors, and government agencies play a key role in a few areas. The first is around policy and partnerships. The Canadian government has an opportunity to provide thought leadership. An example is through our progressive carbon tax. And through thought leadership, we actually create confidence in the markets for international buyers and investors to come to Canada because of those types of policy initiatives. We also want to look at trade agreements. CITA and other progressive trade agreements will also allow us to have better relationships with these regions and ensure that the clean tech ventures understand the best practices to enter those markets and do business. I'd also like to highlight some of the national strategy opportunities. We've seen lots of great conversations between Canadian and European governments as an example on how hydrogen, CCUS, and the bioeconomy can play a significant role in both of our economies through collaboration and understanding the needs of each of our respective regions and honing in on what innovation opportunities we can export. We also need to look at adoption. If we're truly going to scale clean tech ventures in Canada, we do need a strong domestic procurement incentive program. And really, it's those demonstrations that allow us to home grow our solutions in Canada, but showcase those solutions internationally. We've also been working on some other adoption opportunities through our SDG Connect program in partnership with Trade Commissioner Services. This strategic matchmaking gives an opportunity for international buyers to showcase to Canadian innovators what their needs are, and again, creating opportunities for Canadians to innovate on a global scale and export. The next bucket is on capital. So we've seen lots of different international mechanisms that really create strong capital environments for early stage and later stage investments. And it's also important to have strategic investor matchmaking sessions, profiling Canadian ventures in all of the respective regions where their technologies could apply. The next bucket is around innovation. While we are starting to see many clean tech companies scale, it's important that we have a really strong, robust funnel of earlier stage ventures as well. So I think we need as a collective to dig in and really ensure that the number of high quality early stage ventures are problem driven and understand the opportunities both domestically and globally. And of course, programs from the FedDev and provincial government agencies can really help drive these types of initiatives. Finally, in the terms of scale, we do need to see more investment in scaling ventures. I know that there's lots of announcements recently on support to do that. But if we can continue to feed that scale up mentality and that growth mentality to the ventures and provide the support they need, they'll be much better positioned for exponential and export growth. So while Cleantech 101 was challenging for investors, what we've really seen over the last year is that over $1.7 trillion in capital inflows to ESG and sustainability related funds have come to fruition, and a record $23.7 billion of venture capital investment was deployed to 1,255 climate technologies. A combined policy and capital push is a generational opportunity for Canada. We have great technology developers and terrific universities, but our markets and local investors are insufficient to fully capitalize our ventures to compete on a global scale. In fact, a study by SDTC and Cycle Capital shows that Canadian clean tech ventures generally are only able to raise about half the equity and debt capital as a comparable clean tech company to the US and other European regions. We need to get Canada's private capital and industry off the sidelines and massively engaged with our clean tech entrepreneurs if we want to compete in the decades ahead. To showcase some success stories, we are succeeding in some areas on in the international stage. Carbon engineering, Occidental has a partnership with them in Texas. Svante has done a great partnership with Chevron in California, MindSense in South America, Enerchem and their waste to chemical plants in Spain and China. So we're starting to see momentum, but how do we turn these 4 stories into 100 stories? That's what we're really trying to dig into. A bit of feedback, SDTC is a great opportunity and mechanism to showcase the demonstration of technologies. It would be interesting to look at having a first project deployment off-site as well as part of that funding model. EDC also great in supporting the export development opportunities. It would be nice to see some more flexibility in financing options. EDC is not empowered to take technology risk and below market returns. Global Affairs has also been a great strategic partner for us in our ventures. We work very closely with the Trade Commissioner Services. Things like industry matchmaking events or our SDG Connect events are a great opportunity, again, to profile Canadian ventures and position Canada as that global leader. ECCC has also been very supportive across Canada in supporting CIIT workshops. These types of programs help educate all the different stakeholders in the community to understand what we need to do good business and follow all the trade expectations that have been set at the federal level. And finally, IRAP, their pilot program, both domestically and internationally, is another great tool. In terms of closing remarks, we really are doing everything we can to help SMEs scale at home to help sell abroad. But we need more resources and tools to do that as an accelerator community. We need to scale the supply of export-ready companies and more proactively source overseas companies seeking Canadian innovation. We propose a ready-to-export training program, an expanded SDG Connect program that scales our pipeline of export-ready companies, and we have some opportunities to present proposals in that regard. There is also a critical need for further development of relationships between Canada and the global network of clean tech accelerators in partner countries. This includes US, EU, Asia, and Latin America. These accelerators are beachheads and validation points for our companies to access these global markets and investors. And while we have done some of the work in this area off the side of our desks, we'd love to lean in on this with the federal government as well. Finally, there are some interesting best practices that we can lean in on. Yesterday, an article came out regarding the Can Health model that can be applied to clean tech. And we would love to work with all of you and your various partners and collaborators to see how that model can help clean tech in Canada scale and really position us export ready for global markets. Thank you for having me, and look forward to Q&A.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. On to Mr. Lobb for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First question would be for the Forest Products Association. With the, I think you were talking about the mass timber initiative. And so we all see the news, we see the price of a 2x4 triple or quadruple in a year or a year and a half. And so when somebody's looking at timber versus concrete, what's the value proposition? I mean, this is an export opportunity. What's the value proposition there?
Thank you for the question. And I think that, well, there's a little difference between price of conventional lumber right now and the mass timber market. But where we see the real advantages with mass timber is where it can replace some of the other more emission intensive building materials such as concrete and steel. And it's really proving to have many advantages as far as its carbon footprint. So less carbon footprint. It's a lot of advantages, and it's prefabricated in many cases, so construction can happen more quickly. And then there's a lot of benefits, even just to you know, the beauty of the product and the way that the inhabitants feel when they're in it. So lots of different value propositions there. It's also something that can be made out of some of the waste material of other lumber manufacturing processes. So it's a value added product, which is great to see. It also can be a longer lived wood product. So it's the ability to store that carbon for longer periods of time instead of it going back into the atmosphere or being landfilled, which is really exciting. So it's something that had really, you know, initiated in Europe, but we're seeing it in North America and primarily here in Canada recently. So it's just great to see this new adoption of technology. And I would say one of the challenges is the having the architecture and construction profession become more familiar with this building product. So lots of great work going on right now to educate, doing demonstration projects, and then of course the building codes. So, you know, right now we're at mid-rise tall wood buildings, but having those building codes increase so we can have taller wood buildings into the future.
From an export perspective of the engineered lumber, so the true joist, the manufactured floor joist, the OSB, plywood, MDF, all that stuff, how's that export market for Canadian lumber companies right now?
Well, I'm not our trade expert specifically on this file, so I can get back with more of the stats on that. But we're definitely seeing increased investment, particularly some in the OSB and siding. So a lot more building with those products happening in the North American market. And we're seeing even a couple of our member companies in particular in British Columbia have opened up facilities that had since closed after the mountain pine beetle and some of the closures in mills back from the recession in 2007, 2008. So I think it's just that's case in point that we're seeing more demand for those products with those facilities being reopened recently.
Okay, do you have anything to do with the cardboard box industry at all? Do you guys liaison with anything in that?
There is a separate packaging association, which I'm happy to put you in contact with. We do some, you know, we stay in touch. There's a collaboration with a number of associations that are within the same kind of sphere of wood products and associated products, but I can put you in contact with that individual if that would be helpful.
Okay, one other question is on biosecurity, and you did touch on it already. And in Ontario, my home province, from the west to the east end of the province, we've been decimated by the emerald ash borer. And I just wondered, yes, this study is looking at the environmental export opportunities, but also in this particular case with you here today, there has to be a little recognition of the biosecurity of an invasive species coming in and destroying the very thing you're trying to export. So do you work with CFIA? Do you work, like, I mean, your board of directors are all the biggest players in Canada. Explain to us maybe how you work on biosecurity, or is there any discussion in your association with that?
There is, to some degree. You know, we do work closely with our government counterparts at Natural Resources Canada, as well as Food and Inspection Agency, on ways to absolutely trade routes to minimize the import of exotic invasives. In case in point, the emerald ash borer that we've seen. So that work is underway. It's not a kind of a core function of the work of FPAC, although we, again, our member companies and those that use those trade routes are very aware of the requirements. But then we're also we want to make sure there's native pest species that we've had significant problems with, such as the mountain pine beetle, spruce budworm, and others that are having a real impact on trees and healthy forests in Canada. So that's where we have a primary role to build resiliency into the forest moving forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lobb. I'm sorry your time is up. On to Mr. Sheehan for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much for that absolutely fabulous testimony, and I was just very, very pleased to have you here in our last day with such great information. And I just wanted to drill down on a couple of things, and I'm going to start with Jeanette Jackson first. You described some of what your Clean Tech Accelerator is doing. So could you help the committee understand and give some testimony around how and you went through a couple at the end. I want you to expand on a couple of your programs that you're developing or have developed, and how are they different from current programs? And I'll start with a ready to export program as it relates to clean tech. Like, what kind of differences are you seeing for those new entrepreneurs, I'll call them, or those entrepreneurs that are fairly new that want to scale up, and how your programming is different. And I'll let you take it from there to expand on those particular programs that you touched on.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we found, we've supported over 550 ventures across Canada over the last 3.5 years. And we still find that there's still too many innovators that are technologies looking for problems. And so in our new strategic plan and all of our programming, we're reimagining the accelerator model. We're working with industry to clearly identify their innovation gaps that they need to reach to achieve net zero targets. And what you do is you put that at the start of the funnel in your call for the cohorts. So an example would be water. We know that we have several large multinationals in the manufacturing space, production space that use a lot of water, and they're looking for innovation to solve specific problems. We actually do calls for those innovators and weed them out and really help the industry partners better understand and work closely with those ventures to improve the probability of success. Now, one of the important notes on those calls is it's not only domestic, it's international. So we have a pretty strong network through the Trade Commissioner Services, through other networks where industry partners are looking to Canada. We've become somewhat well known for our ability to innovate in clean tech broadly. And so through the programming, we can actually curate and support ventures that have a higher probability of success right out of the gate because they're problem driven right out of the gate. On the export readiness side, it's really making sure that they have the right team, value prop, business model, competitive advantage to compete, that they're properly funded so that they can export and scale. So a lot of our programming provides that support or guidance to ensure that they are export ready. And you need to be at a certain threshold. You need to have demonstrated your technology. You needed to have a really, your business model has to make sense for that scalable opportunity. And so we really dig into those specifics. Clean tech is broad. So now we're starting to break it down and be more proactive in finding ventures that solve real problems that people will pay a lot of money for as well.
Thank you for that. I'm going to switch over to Kate, I guess. And first of all, congratulations on that, the program of creating the PPE masks, and it's just amazing. Are those masks subject to any duties or anything like that as they cross into the American border with the new CUSMA agreement?
Thanks for the question, Terry. I'm not aware. And it's my understanding, and maybe Mahima, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just been trialed. It's not in commercial capacity at the moment.
Yes, Kate, that's correct. Right now, these masks are still, I believe, phase 2 has been completed, and there remains one more phase. So right now, they're still not being mass produced, but they are ready to be so.
Well, that's good news, and I think that's just a perfect example. And I've seen from the Forest Product Association a really great graphic about from the tree and whatnot all the way through to some of the PPE. So congratulations on that. And one of the things that we've been talking about, obviously, and with the softwood lumber situation is creating more value added in Canada. and then sending it over there. It creates more jobs, it creates more opportunity. And so I wanted to congratulate you on that. If you could please, sort of define, in your opinion, what are the other opportunities that there is in the forest industry as it relates to clean tech? And I'm thinking more like we've heard testimony, from the solar power people. We've heard from the small nuclear power people. Are any of those other technologies being incorporated into the Forest Association as a whole?
Thanks. Mahima, I'll let you answer that first. I might add in after.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question. Absolutely. So the forest products sector, biomass out of wood, low quality wood residues that are residues from the manufacturing process. There is an opportunity for the forest product sector to work collaboratively with other sectors that are looking to reduce their GHG emissions from the fuels that they use. But more importantly, I would want to bring your attention to for 140 capital shovel-ready projects that are ready to go. And they're worth $1.5 billion in economic value that can further help improve environmental outcomes. They can help strengthen Canada's global competitiveness and create jobs that are much needed in this time of crisis.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Ms. Lindsay. I think Ms. Sharma has used up the time. On to Mr. Savard Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Oui, bonjour, excusez-moi.
Hello. Sorry, Madam Chair. And thank you to the witnesses. Thank you for your presentations. I would like to ask my question to the Association of Forestry Products of Canada. In the Bloc Québécois, we recently presented a study that was not done by ourselves, it was done by a third party. And it was an important study on the maximization of forestry potential for Quebec. And we had made 4 priority recommendations for the industry. I won't go through all of them now, but one of them was to use the new White House administration to obtain a full exemption of all tariffs on Quebec softwood lumber exports, and to make sure that the development of the forestry industry would be defined as a priority of the Canadian government, given the economic potential and the role played by the forest products in the fight against climate change. What are your expectations with regards to the government following the arrival of the Biden administration in the White House?
Merci for the question. I'll answer in English if you don't mind, but it's an excellent question.
Aucun problème, allez-y, il y a l'interprétation.
Okay, parfait. It's an excellent question, and that the softwood lumber dispute and prior disputes have remained very problematic, both to the Canadian industry, but we see more and more now it's causing harm to U.S. consumers of wood products as well, with rising prices. And so the FPAC very much supports the federal government efforts to achieve a Canada-U.S. trade regime with the fewest trade restrictions possible. And I will also say that we applaud Bloc Québécois and the recent forest strategy, and we hope that other parties look to pull components of that strategy moving forward as well. Merci.
Merci. Je sais pas. Collègue voulait également ajouter.
Thank you. I don't know if your colleague had something to add.
Comme vous voulez.
No, thank you. I have nothing to add.
Parfait.
Great. To your knowledge, well, were you recently consulted on the subject, and what measures have been taken with regards to the softwood lumber dispute following the arrival of Mr. Biden in the White House?
I would say that I personally have not been part of those negotiations. I know our association does work closely with the Softwood Lumber Board, which has been having those conversations. So we do look forward to revisiting those discussions and looking for better outcomes with the new administration. Thank you.
Donc, pour l'instant, vous n'avez pas d'écho de...
So right now, you haven't heard anything with regards to real changes, with regards to complete exemptions of tariffs. You haven't been made aware that there might be some type of agreement or any news shortly on this?
Not to my knowledge, no. Thank you.
Parfait, je vous remercie.
Thank you. I'd also like to ask you, because we do have the market development program seeking to develop international markets for Canadian forest products and to promote an increase in the use of wood and construction of mid-sized buildings and residential buildings in North America. In 2019, we saw that this was better for the Western producers in BC in particular, better than producers in Ontario and Quebec. In 2020, 3/4 of the sums of the program were allocated to BC organizations. This is what has been observed. How could we improve this program so that would be to the benefit to Eastern producers as well in a more equitable fashion?
Merci. Thank you for the question. I would say that there has been recent gains in market development, particularly with some of the Asian trading partners, China, Japan, Korea, and we're very encouraging of that type of development activity taking place with other global markets to expand beyond the existing global partners that we have. So we're encouraging federal government to make that progress to benefit all Canadian forest producers. Thank you.
Donc, le programme en lui-même, est-ce que...
So the program in and of itself, are we expecting modifications, changes, improvements, things, criteria that could be changed that would really help the Eastern producers? Because we have to observe that right now, it's not to the benefit, it's not to the fair benefit to Eastern producers. So there's something wrong somewhere. Do you know where?
It's not, I'm not the file lead internally at FPAC on this, but I will confer with my colleague Joel Newheimer, who leads this work. And there is a set of recommendations that we've recently put forward as far as a resilient recovery that speaks to many of the challenges that are in place, whether it's reliable transportation networks, reliable port authorities, et cetera, moving forward. So I'd be happy to provide that in a follow-up because it's an excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. On to Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much to our witnesses for being here with us today. I wanted to ask, a recurring theme at this committee over the life of this parliament has been a contention by many witnesses across many different industries that, Canada really stands out in terms of not doing a lot of industrial planning or sector-based industrial planning. And so, I think what we've heard from a number of sectors is that they'd like to be able to sit down with government and hash out a medium and long-term plan for their industry, and to really coordinate government policy with the aspirations of the industry. And of course, when we're talking about a really important emerging industry, I think even less emerging now than it was 5 to 10 years ago in terms of clean tech. Obviously, this is important. I just wonder if you could speak a little bit to the way that your industry, for each of you, is able to engage with government, and the extent to which you feel that there should be some more formal planning with government around your industry so that, whether it's trade policy or certain kinds of domestic policy, I know procurement has come up already today on several occasions, can work within your industry to make sure that there is actually a plan and that the actions of government and the policies of government are reinforcing the development of the industry in a way that's beneficial both to businesses and to workers within the industry. And so I'm just wondering, are you satisfied that government is where it needs to be on that? Do you think Canada stands out as not doing as much as our allies and competitors around industrial planning? And what do you think those missing pieces are? So I'll start with Ms. Jackson, and then we can go to our witnesses from the Forest Products Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. Great question. Though our roots are in British Columbia, we've actually supported industry and innovators across the country. But I'm going to lean in a little bit on what we're seeing in British Columbia, just as an example. So we did a phase 1 cluster strategy to identify the real core competencies of the region and what the largest emitters in the province need to do to reach net zero targets. And we identified 6 areas of interest: water, resource, transportation, built environment, ag tech, kind of the usual suspects. But what we do find is that you are correct. There is not enough capacity for industry to take a step back and reflect on where they really want to be in 2030, 2050. We obviously have the policy pressure to reach climate targets, but what's the next layer of that? What's the how? How do we set priorities as a collective? And so one example, and again, 50% of our time is spent on acceleration. The other 50% plus is actually spent on industry and investor engagement. We proposed an actual energy decision tree to decide where does hydrogen, where does biofuels, where does electrification fit to, again, help these large emitters transition. And that's just one of many different platforms that could be useful in helping industry make decisions, set priorities, and be willing to take the risks where they need to. And this can be expanded globally. And in fact, we work very closely with FP Innovations on several of these conversations as well. I'll pass it over to Kate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blakey. I'll start and then Mahima can feed in, but I would say absolutely, like we would look for a sector strategy. So I wouldn't say that we've seen that to the extent possible yet. We do see it in some of our other competing countries like Finland and Sweden, where they have very strong forest sector strategies that the government has put forward specifically for climate change targets. We have an existing bioeconomy framework that we would love to see implemented. And I would say just generally, we often see different regulatory or government programmatic areas coming up that are at cross purposes with each other, whether it's low carbon, whether it's conservation agenda, whether it's inclusive growth. So we would absolutely appreciate sitting down with different departments federally to walk through pathways to success and to address some of those challenges. And I'll just see if Mahima has anything to add there.
Yes, thank you, Kate. So as my colleague mentioned, a recent bioeconomy framework was published by the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers in 2017. With that in mind, I just want to note that federal government can play a key role in helping to facilitate and increase the demand for bioproducts. Some of this could happen and be made possible by using better modeling tools, better data management for forest biomass supply that would help researchers understand and quantify what are the economic or the bioeconomy opportunities that exist in Canada, reviewing regulatory processes to ensure that they're updated and appropriate. Regulatory duplication and cumbersome regulations hurt the productivity and the competitiveness of emerging markets. And recognizing relative reductions in GHG emissions from using wood in awarding contracts for public works. So these are just some of the ways that I think government can play a role.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Blakey. On to Ms. Gray for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to go to Forest Products Association first and build off the questioning from my colleague MP Lobb. And I know that you've raised concerns about legislation currently going through the process in New York and California, which could harm our forestry exports if passed into law. So first, what percentage of our U.S. exports go to California and New York?
Don't have the breakdown for those two states right now, but the U.S. in total is a significant market for Canada. And so BC and Alberta would be a significant provider for California, and Ontario and Quebec would be a significant provider for the state of New York.
Okay, fair enough. And it's quite interesting that two very similar laws are going through two state legislatures at the same time. So do you foresee the risk of other states maybe introducing legislation around this as well, or are you hearing that at all?
We are taking this very seriously. We have seen past procurement laws in the state of California in particular has historically been focused on tropical deforestation. So the fact that we're seeing the Canadian boreal forest included in this legislation is very concerning. Canada is a leader. We have the strongest legislation to maintain a sustainable forest management and to maintain forests in Canada. And so to see even the preamble within these two pieces of legislation is very concerning. We believe that it's going to be discriminatory to Canada, and we want to ensure that it's not passed and unless it's amended to be workable. And we want to prevent it being a precedent setting for other U.S. states. Absolutely.
Thank you. You actually answered my next question, so I'll go to another here. What effects could this legislation potentially have if it comes into force, and specifically around job losses potentially in the Canadian industry?
Absolutely. So almost 70% of the area under forest management in Canada is in the boreal forest. So it's a significant region where forest management takes place. I would say also where in particular, there's an anti-forestry ENGO that's behind this legislation as the co-sponsor. And where they're targeting is the northern limit of the forest management area. So an area that is important to wood supply, but very important to northern forestry communities, in particular Indigenous communities. This is where you see really important co-management and Indigenous-owned forest management operations, such as Norsask, such as Canadian Craft in Manitoba that partners with 7 First Nations, in some areas in Northwestern Ontario and Quebec, where you're seeing joint ventures taking place. So that is really where there stands to be an impact and harm to those communities, those workers. And we know that over 230,000 people are employed in the forest sector, up to 1 million indirectly employed, and 1,400 Indigenous-owned forest businesses as part of the forest sector as well.
Well, I understand that the Forest Products Association of Canada is calling on the federal government to come to bat for our forestry sector and those hundreds of thousands of jobs that you referred to. So what could the federal government and our trade minister be doing right now to get this issue resolved?
We have been engaging very much so with Minister Ng, with Global Affairs Canada. There's been very positive engagement to date with the consulate offices in San Francisco and Albany as well. More discussions are taking place as well with Natural Resources Canada. So we would say that we appreciate the engagement to date, and we know that it may have to ramp up as these two pieces of legislation make their way through those legislative processes. So we encourage more support. We've also had great support from labor, both Unifor and steelworkers, and more communities, both municipal and Indigenous communities have also written directly. So we're encouraged by the support, and we look for further ongoing discussion with Minister Ng and rest of federal government.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Dhaliwal for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would echo the comments made by my dear friend Terry Shaheen. It's a fabulous testimony, and I also want to thank my friend for wearing a green tie for clean tech. My first question is going to go to Ms. Jeanette Jackson. In collaboration with the EDC last year, the Foresight developed a social media campaign dedicating to recognize the entrepreneur women who are leading clean tech technologies and innovation in Canada. Could you please comment on ways to increase the participation of women in clean tech sector?
Absolutely, yes. We are working very hard on how to incorporate diversity and inclusion across all of our programmings, campaigns, and initiatives. Really, it's about relationship building and connecting with communities at a much deeper level. And so how we do that is we work with other accelerators, because we're sort of a clean tech focus. A lot of other accelerators are and innovation communities are more generic, they're health tech, et cetera. And so we really lean in with these different partners to, once the clean tech companies hit a certain level of maturity, have the opportunity to engage. We've actually put forward a few proposals to different government agencies for a Women in Clean Tech program. Mars has done some work with the ventures in RBC, and we've identified over 50 clean tech leaders, women leaders across the country. So it's really about capacity and having some bandwidth to lean in on that. And we'd love to mobilize some resources to develop and grow that campaign and all of the women involved in the clean tech sector.
Ms. Mahima Sharma and Ms. Kate Lindsay, you have anything to add?
I would say that there's similar initiatives underway in the forest sector as well. There's a really big initiative underway called Free to Grow, which is particularly focused on expanding women in the forest sector in Canada at all levels and positions. And then there's a number of other initiatives underway at different forestry college institutes, and lots of informal networks going on. Women in Wood is one that's really growing in popularity. So just ensuring that there's a safe place for women to join the sector, and absolutely inclusive, diverse workforce moving forward is going to be better for everyone.
Ms. Sharma mentioned net zero by 2050. Could you explain or expand on how the role that forest products industry can play in green recovery, and also how the industry can play a role on an international goal shared by many of our partners towards a net zero by 2050?
Kate, why don't you start this one and I can fill in the gaps?
Sure. Yeah, we're well underway in putting together the forest sector contribution to Canada's net zero pathway by 2050. In particular, we're focusing on the role in the forests where we can sequester more carbon, the role in the products. So what Mahima talked about as far as those low carbon alternatives and bioproducts, also in the facilities, so reduced emissions. So lots of great work happening with fuel switching as a result of biomass, and then also through the transportation network. So switching from truck to rail and other kind of infrastructure modal shifts. In addition, I would say that the biomass and some of the wood residue is definitely going to help other sectors decarbonize, whether it's production of steel, and a great example right now is one of our mills in St. Félicien, Quebec, Resolute Mill. Waste heat from the pulp mill is actually going into a greenhouse to reduce the energy needs of that greenhouse, and growing cucumbers. So anyway, lots of great examples of the forest sector contributing to a broader net zero play.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. On to Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Parfait, merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais...
Thank you. I would like to come back to FPAC. I would like to give you the opportunity to correct a prejudice that is quite widespread. We oftentimes link the forestry industry with clear cuts. And there was a film in Quebec about 20 years ago that was called Erreur Boréale by Richard Desjardins. He's an artist that's very well known in Quebec, and this was done for the National Film Board. And I think it's a good portrait at the time. Could you explain how the situation has evolved? And we're not doing clear cutting anymore. This is a wonderful opportunity to change a prejudice that exists out there.
Merci. Thank you very much for the question. It's an excellent point. There is a lot of misinformation and misconception about forestry practices. And what the most progressive practices today are really around understanding the natural range of variation. So particularly in the boreal forest, for example, fire is a dominant, it's a disturbance-driven ecosystem, largely by fire. And forestry is now mimicking the frequency of fire and the patterns of fire, so we can work kind of within that what's called ecosystem-based forest management. And then we're also seeing that so many of the other values that are important for wildlife species, for soil, for water, are being incorporated into forest management planning, as well as all of the values that are locally provided. This is being done on public land for the most part in Canada. So local voices, Indigenous communities have the opportunity to feed into those long-term forest management plans. They're done over 100 to 150 years. And so very much so that clear cutting is not the same image in our mind that it may have been 30 or 40 years ago, but it's really around sustainability, ecosystem-based management, and resilient forests for the future.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lindsay. And to our witnesses, we have to move on to our next group of witnesses. We have quite a few departmental officials that are coming up for our next part of our meeting. Thank you very much to your witnesses that we have today on this segment. Very informative. So I will suspend for a few minutes until we manage to get everybody with their microphone set up. Right, so we'll suspend for a few minutes. Thank you. trade and development, industry, natural resources, environment, and from the Business Development Bank of Canada and Export and Development Canada. It's a big group of witnesses, and we very much look forward to your comments. Before I open the floor up for our witnesses, Mr. Savard Tremblay, you had a very quick point you wanted to make.
Oui, ce sera très bref par respect pour les témoins.
Yes, I'll be brief because I'm sure the witnesses have a lot to say. Mrs. Chair, I wanted to ask you, last Friday you were saying that following the motion that I tabled on Bill C-216, you said that you were open to finding a way to push this ahead. I was wondering where you were at with your thought process on this.
Thank you. Still working on it. Still working on it. Thank you. All right, Ms. Kwan, you have the floor, please.
Madam Chair, if I might just have a quick intervention before we get started.
Please, very quickly. We have a lot of important information here. Yes, Mr. Blake.
I appreciate that. It's just in respect to the last round of questions. I know, usually
yes,
if my colleague from the block gets to his next question, that courtesy is usually extended, and I do want to get on with the meeting, so I'm not going to make any more of it for now, but just I know you have many things to manage in the course of a meeting, but it's a practice that may become contentious were it to continue. So I just felt obligated to.
Well, thank you, Mr. Blakey. I should have clarified. I was supposed to have stopped at 1:45, and I'm always anxious to try to get everybody a chance to speak as much as possible, and I missed the 1:45 deadline, and so that's where we're at. So thank you for raising both of those issues, both of the members. Okay, Ms. Kwan, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Rosalind Kwan, Director General of the Trade Sectors Bureau of the Trade Commissioner Service at Global Affairs Canada. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. As a representative of Global Affairs Canada, please allow me to say a few words about the Trade Commissioner Service, the TCS for short. The TCS is a network of international business professionals who help Canadian businesses grow through international sales, commercial partnerships, and investment. The TCS has over 1,000 trade representatives working in over 160 cities around the world, including in offices across Canada, to help Canadian firms succeed in entering or expanding in international markets. Over 100 of these trade commissioners have responsibilities that include supporting Canadian clean technology firms. Within the federal clean tech ecosystem, the TCS is just one player in the wider ecosystem of clean growth partners, which includes colleagues who are with us here today, NRCan, ICED, ECCC, as well as SCTC, and our international trade portfolio partners, EDC, BDC, CCC, and Invest in Canada. We all work closely together to help startups and scale-ups of clean tech firms, and witnesses here today all are part of the Clean Growth Hub, a unique whole of government focal point for clean technology dedicated to supporting Canadian companies to navigate federal programs and services. As this committee has heard through the input of industry witnesses, domestic efforts to scale and finance clean tech companies are key to increasing clean tech exports, and we collaborate closely on this effort. ICED supports Canadian clean tech businesses through a number of programs and initiatives, including the Strategic Innovation Fund and the recently announced Net Zero Accelerator. The Strategic Innovation Fund has been a critical tool to growing Canada's economy while advancing Canada's green industrial strategy and transforming the economy for long-term cleaner growth. The Strategic Innovation Fund has invested over $1 billion in large projects with a significant clean tech component, and the next Net Zero Accelerator will further drive investment into large emission reducing and job creating projects across every region of Canada. Budget 2021 includes funding of $1 billion over 5 years to leverage private investment towards large transformative clean technology projects. This initiative will eliminate risk from decarbonization projects for traditional lenders and bringing down the cost of capital and making many of these large-scale projects more economically feasible while decarbonizing the Canadian economy and creating new jobs. Other partners I've mentioned include SDTC, which supports small businesses and startups in their commercialization efforts. As of March 2020, SDTC has provided $1.28 billion in funding to 447 projects, SDTC supported companies have generated $2.7 billion in annual revenues, created more than 14,000 jobs, and brought 126 new technologies to market, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by an estimated 19.3 megatons annually. BDC has the only dedicated pan-Canadian cleantech financing team, with Canada's largest cleantech fund of $600 million. Through this team, BDC offers cleantech entrepreneurs equity and financing solutions to support and accelerate their growth and operations. As of March 2021, $370 million have been committed. NRCan helps Canadian companies develop new innovative technologies and products to transition to a low carbon future. The department also assists Canada's natural resources sectors, helping them to improve their efficiency, adopt clean technologies, and develop our resources sustainably. NRCan has several clean tech support programs and initiatives to support resource industries and value chains. ECCC has policies and regulations and funding that spur the development and scale up of our clean technologies domestically and abroad. ECCC helps Canadian exporters of environmental and clean tech goods and services expand into foreign markets by leveraging ECCC's international environmental cooperation networks with foreign governments and stakeholders, and through its multilateral and bilateral initiatives, including environmental cooperation agreements or environment chapters of free trade agreements. Canada's Export Credit Agency, EDC, plays an important role in supporting Canadian exporters through the provision of innovative financial solutions. EDC is the largest provider of financial solutions for Canadian cleantech companies looking to expand their businesses internationally. In 2020, EDC served 288 cleantech companies and facilitated $4.6 billion in trade in the cleantech space and close to $14 billion since 2012. Canadian firms are leading the way in the development of the clean technology the world is seeking. The environmental and cleantech sector contributed $70.5 billion to GDP in 2019, provided more than 341,000 well-paying jobs, and is growing faster than the rest of the economy. The sector exported $13.5 billion of environmental and clean technology products in 2019, accounting for 1.8% of total Canadian exports. 3/4 of these exports were destined to the United States, Europe with 1.7 billion, and Asia with 1.2 billion, were the other important markets for Canadian environmental and clean tech products and services. Canada's modern free trade agreements provide Canadian clean tech companies advantages by eliminating tariffs, creating an equal playing field for service providers, improving labor mobility provisions, and expanding access to government procurement opportunities when applicable, amongst others. For the Trade Commissioner Service, promoting clean tech in global markets is a key priority, as you've heard from many of the witnesses through the sessions you've had. A priority supported by our Clean Tech International Business Development Strategy. This strategy was first announced in Budget 2017 and renewed through Budget 2021. And it has proven successful at helping Canadian clean tech firms tap into export opportunities and the rapidly growing pools of global finance and climate. And since 2017, the strategy has helped generate more than 83 million in commercial successes by Canadian clean tech firms and helping them to scale internationally. Our Trade Commissioner Service programming services have supported hundreds of clean tech firms across Canada to secure international research and development partnerships and diversify into global markets. Through our CAN export programs, we've provided 10 million to support over 260 clean tech projects. And since 2019, our Canadian Technology Accelerated programs have supported over 85 of Canada's most promising clean tech firms to improve their access to global markets. The clean tech sector represents significant opportunities for Canadian companies and the economy as a whole. The collaborative efforts of the TCS and all of our partners in promoting clean tech positions Canadian workers and businesses to be among the leaders in the increasingly low carbon global economy. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. We look forward to your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kwan. It's great to see you again. On to Mr. Abotai for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the witness. The question actually to Ms. Kwan, since she did the speaking first on behalf of the departments. We do have a trade deficit in $6.4 billion on complete trade, about $33.5 billion. 70% or more of that export goes to United States. That means the deficit mostly is with the United States. In 2021 budget, there's $21.3 million over 5 years to enhance the export and the sales or the activities of ECT. Ms. Kwan, in your honesty, do you believe that the $21.3 million over 5 years is going to really help us to at least balance the trade which is significant, $6.4 billion, or almost more than 20% overall?
Thank you, Mr. Abutai, for your question. And yes, we did get a renewal through the budget 2021 for renewing our resources that we have in the Trade Commissioner Service. That include trade commissioners in Canada at regional offices. That includes trade commissioners abroad in international key hubs where we see the greatest opportunity for Canadian clean tech products and services. These resources were put in place, as I mentioned, first in 2017. And as I outlined, we've seen through our metrics and tracking that they have generated promising and very positive results. And what we do with our resources is both starting from in Canada, supporting our Canadian companies and working with them and linking them up through the network that you see here with us today and through their reach, which you can imagine how expansive that could be, and that could be beneficial to Canadian companies, to the international piece where we have trade commissioners locally in place to help connect them with the opportunities abroad. Sorry, please go ahead.
So the $21.3 million is going to spend on hiring more people from the public sector in order to be able to help and assist. What about the industry? How are you going to help the industry to enhance the export and to do more, while the deficit has been since 2016 is not getting any better? So the trade deficit is not getting any better since 2016. So how do you believe, what makes you believe that what we're doing is working, and how are we going to really, again, balance those trade deficits?
Thank you. That's a really important point that you raise. Perhaps I could address that first by talking about the trade diversification strategy. As you've mentioned, we want to be able to help our companies grow internationally, to build up their capacities to succeed globally. And then maybe I'll pass it over after to my colleague at CIIT, Mr. Noseworthy, to talk about programs that have been put in, or that will be put in place, that have been put in place to support Canadian industry. So as part of trade diversification strategy, you might have heard from other witnesses as well. We look very much at enhancing the tools and opportunities for our Canadian companies and increasing the capacity of our own network to be able to serve our Canadian companies. And we look at where we trade, who we trade with, what we export, and who exports, including in very much supporting some of the themes that were talked about in the session just before, and promoting women leadership, underrepresented communities, etc. And so we have a number of programs. I talked about Can Export, and I talked about the funding that's gone into that to help Canadian companies make connections abroad internationally, and also there are tools that we've built and we continue to build to be able to work with our companies to be able to help them access information at their fingertips, as well through websites and information tools, as well as through our resources, through our network, as I've explained. So the trade diversification aspect is important because it does help us access more markets and tap into more opportunities internationally. Maybe I'll stop there, and I will invite my colleague, Mr. Noseworthy, to talk a bit about programs under CIIT that are helping Canadian companies in this area.
By all means, thank you, and thank you for the question. I think I'd start by saying that the clean technology sector across Canada is undergoing a transition, and we're starting to see companies scale, but the majority of them are still quite small but highly dependent on export markets. So there have been two key pieces that I think specifically address how the companies in this space can kind of help build Canada's trade capacity. The first is we've been working very closely with them to assist them in developing commercial demonstration projects in international markets. We, in fact, collaboratively with the Trade Commissioner Service, did an exploration trip with a number of companies related to water technologies to India about a year and a half ago in that space. And both the IRAP program and SDTC are capable of supporting companies as they move into that space.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noseworthy. I have to move on. Ms. Bindayan, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that we have a very impressive list of witnesses before us and not a lot of time. I may therefore ask in some of my questions that information be tabled with the committee. I'm thinking in particular, firstly, Ms. Kwan, to your reference regarding BDC's assistance in scaling up clean tech companies, if there's any information that you could provide to the committee in writing regarding how many companies and those initiatives, that would be very helpful. I'm also interested in hearing on how discussions and development with our American counterparts is going on establishing a harmonized standards for electric vehicles. I know that work began some years ago and is ongoing. I'm not sure if anybody is able to speak to that at this time.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I will be happy to help provide some statistics and information on BDC. And if we had time, we have Susan here who could very much maybe very briefly talk about that. On the U.S. Harmonized standards and e-vehicles, in terms of specifics, I wouldn't have those on hand, but I was going to invite our colleagues over at NRCan, Mr. Dufour, perhaps to talk a little bit about our work related to the importance of e-vehicles and the battery work.
That would be great. We have very limited time.
So maybe I'll invite Mr. Dufour, and if we have 1 minute left or something, we can invite Ms. Rohack as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rosaline. I think this one is better addressed by my colleague from ICIIT from India.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
My apologies, I have no specific information in this space and have not been dealing with the issues around the U.S. market.
Okay, not a problem. I wonder then if we could hear from any of the officials on how discussions are moving forward in terms of getting electricity grids. I know that President Biden and our Prime Minister did have the opportunity to discuss the export of some of our electricity to the United States. I'm not sure if anybody has knowledge about those initiatives.
Thank you. I would perhaps invite Mr. Pasuti. Would you have any comments in that regard?
Sure. I hope. Thank you for the question. Certainly, connecting clean power. Canada is in sort of the envious position when it comes to our power sector, that we've got a large share of our resources, our electricity supply, coming from non-emitting technologies. About 82% of our supply comes from hydropower, nuclear, and sources that don't emit greenhouse gas emissions. We've been working at NRCan not only sort of from the perspective of Canada, from a Canada-U.S. relationship, but also interprovincially between provinces in Atlantic Canada, in between Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and in British Columbia, to develop transmission interconnections. It's a big focus of our work. We've been working to do due diligence on particular projects. We've been working with the Canada Infrastructure Bank to try to develop co-financing models where we can support provinces and utilities in developing those technologies. with regards to Canada-US, there are a number of projects that are that have been proposed that are going through regulatory processes, both on the Canadian side of the border and on the US side of the border, particularly in Eastern Canada, with some of the northeastern states. We're working with some of those jurisdictions to advance those projects again through the regulatory process and consider possible opportunities for federal co-financing of projects.
Thank you very much, sir. Madam Chair, do I have time for one more question?
Yeah, you have 1 minute and 20 seconds, please.
Thank you very much. And given that you touched a little bit on the possibility of interprovincial grids, would it be possible either now or tabling with the committee to give us a sense of where some of those projects are at? I believe there is ongoing work, as you mentioned, connecting the Atlantic provinces with our very clean and important electricity here in Quebec.
Certainly, I can elaborate a bit on Atlantic and other jurisdictions. You know, we have identified some priority areas where we've been working very closely with provinces and their utilities across the country to try to get the infrastructure built. We see the real value. You mentioned Atlantic. One of the projects that we've been putting a tremendous amount of effort in with our colleagues from CIIT and other government departments is referred to as the Atlantic Loop. It's essentially transmission infrastructure that would connect provinces like Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec, who have surplus clean power, to jurisdictions like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, who are still sort of working to get fossil fuels out of their generation mix. So we've been working through a number of intergovernmental committee processes to do due diligence on the projects, try to figure out what the best route, what the best technologies, and the biggest challenge in the electricity space is that, you know, ultimately it's the way our systems work in Canada. It's ratepayers, it's households, it's businesses that end up covering the lion's share of the costs in building new infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Pursuti. Sorry to cut you off. Just have to move on. Mr. Savard-Tremblay, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, and welcome to all these witnesses. Thank you for your contribution to our study today. I admit that this is something that I didn't know who to ask this question to Foreign Affairs or Environment Department. So in the budget, it is affirmed that the government will launch a consultation process on carbon at the border. This is a consultation process that will begin in this summer with targeted discussions with provinces and territories and with importers and exporters. In March 2021, the EU Parliament said they agreed on a readjustment of carbon. So they implemented a tarification of carbon on some products imported from third countries. If these countries are not ambitious enough with regards to climate change, well, in your knowledge, is this a mechanism that is appropriate given the obligations of the WTO?
Thank you for the question. I would like to invite Madame Huddleston from ECCC to respond.
So I can speak generally to border carbon adjustments, but not in the context of the WTO. So I don't know if GAC colleagues can add on that point. In the context of border carbon adjustments, as noted, this is something that Canada is exploring as a possible measure to ensure that as we transition to a low carbon economy, it is achieved in a way that's fair and predictable for our businesses and supports international competitiveness for Canadian companies. And as noted, the budget did indicate that the government will be launching a domestic consultation process, which we expect to happen in the coming weeks. And we are working with other like-minded countries, such as the EU, to consider how this approach more broadly fits into global strategies for countries to meet their climate targets, while ensuring a fair and predictable environment for businesses. With respect to the European proposal, Canada did submit formal comments to the EU as part of their consultation process, which, amongst other things, did underline Canada's robust price on carbon. And we also know that the United States has made some comments that they're also looking at this. So I would say this is still an evolving space in terms of policy. And I might cede the floor now, Doug or Rosalind from GAC. I'm not sure if you have anything with respect to WTO.
Please
Sure,
go ahead,
thanks.
Doug.
Sure, thanks, Jim. I'm happy to add to your comments, and good afternoon. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. So yes, this is as Jim said, this is an evolving policy space, very topical, no question about it. A lot of interest from around the world, and I think a lot of it is being driven by the European Union. They announced that they have been conducting a number of studies and analysis, and I understand we'll be in a position to release as part of their broader environmental package. They will be releasing we call it a CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, details on that in mid-July. We are following it very closely, obviously, as Canadian exports to the European marketplace could be impacted. And to the question with respect to, is it WTO consistent? Well, we don't know. I think this is the challenge with respect to carbon border adjustment mechanisms. There have been a great number of studies over the years, and no one has yet implemented one that is WTO consistent. So we're watching carefully. And as Jam noted, Canada is currently in the middle of analyzing whether and how or whether that policy is appropriate for Canada, and we'll continue that analysis, and the consultations will follow later this year.
Je vous remercie justement concernant les.
Thank you. Now, regarding consultations on the budget, we expect that this will begin in the summer. Is there already a calendar for consultations that has been set out? Do you know what sectors will be covered? Is the energy sector part of this, for example?
So thank you for the question. My understanding is that the intent is to consult broadly and to launch these consultations domestically in the near term. I'm afraid I don't have precise details on hand, but I'm very happy to follow up and provide additional information.
Je vous remercie. Avant de me lancer, Madame la Présidente, le temps qu'il me reste.
Thank you. How much time do I have left, Madam Chair?
40 seconds.
40 secondes, mon Dieu.
40 seconds. Okay, what can I ask in 40 seconds? Well, so that Canada can be economically competitive in a sustainable way, a lot of coordination work will be done within the federal government and the provincial governments and also different entities. What are the coordination interdepartmental measures and the programs that are foreseen for all of this?
Concernant finalement les biens et services de technologie verte.
For goods and services for green technology?
That comment.
Sinon, je la reprendrai pour le prochain tour.
Yes. Can anyone give a brief answer to the comment? Otherwise, I will move on.
So
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I can respond quickly to that. So within the federal government, as it relates to climate change, we are very much taking a whole of government approach. That includes dedicated regular meetings at the assistant deputy minister and deputy minister level to ensure that governments, or departments rather, are working together and mutually supporting the various programs and policies that have been proposed or announced.
Thank you very much for that answer.
And then for individual programs. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Hudbest. On to Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prasuti, I just wanted to come back to the discussion that we were having earlier about, I suppose I take you to mean, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, both increasing the capability for transmission between provinces, but also actually trying to build a more common grid and having grid interconnectivity. I know you were talking about a project that you're looking at in Eastern Canada, but of course, in Western Canada, the provinces of Saskatchewan and Alberta still use a significant amount of coal to generate their electricity, and they're bookended by the provinces of BC and Manitoba, both of which have a considerable supply of hydroelectricity. I'm just wondering if the department is working with provincial partners in a way similar to what you described on the East Coast, with Western provinces, and exploring the possibility not just of enhanced transmission between Western provinces, but also the possibility of building a more interconnected grid in the Western region.
Yes, thanks for the question. We are in fact working across the country. We've done technical analysis and studies over the course of the last several years to identify those most promising projects that we think can kind of help with emissions reductions and also keeping rates affordable for Canadians. Like that I mentioned in the Atlantic, we've got work underway with Saskatchewan and with Manitoba right now to advance a project known as the Prairie Link. So essentially some grid integration between the two provinces that would sort of allow surplus clean power from Manitoba to flow into Saskatchewan to help with sort of retiring some of the coal. We're doing the same thing in British Columbia. We've got a dialogue underway with BC Hydro and the province, Canada Infrastructure Bank, to look at how we can build some grid connections that would help connect natural gas facilities in the northeastern part of the province that would help them use electric drives instead of gas drives to lower their emissions. So we are in fact looking across the country and trying to work with any of those provincial jurisdictions and their utilities that want to work with the federal government. Certainly electricity is a provincial domain, so we have to be working in lockstep with those jurisdictions.
Now, when you're undertaking that work, are you looking at opportunities to incorporate if there's new infrastructure being built that, whether it crosses provincial boundaries or whether it's infrastructure within a province, but going to newer areas, trying to piggyback other important infrastructure like broadband onto those projects? Or is your mandate kind of narrowly focused on issues of electricity?
The work that we've been doing primarily is around electricity, and most of the work that we're when we try to develop new transmission infrastructure, we're often working in existing corridors, and in fact, in at least 2 of the 3 cases that I've mentioned, it's existing corridors where we're trying to add more transmission where it already exists, beef up existing transmission. I know there are other parts of the government, other departments, and perhaps some folks here that might be able to speak to broadband and other initiatives, but not so much me.
Thank you. My next question is a little more general, although might be most properly directed to the Department of Industry. I think one of the recurring themes at this committee over the course of the Parliament has been hearing from a number of folks, both in industry, both on the employer side or business side, and from a number of labor unions as well, that Canada stands out among our international trading partners for a distinct lack of industrial policy and planning. And of course, we're here to talk about, how to increase export opportunities. We talk often about trade deals, but in the Canadian context, we do that, it seems, without a concerted plan for what we want strategic industries to look like in the next 10 to 20, 30 years. I think, of Canada's lack, for instance, of a plan for the aerospace industry or the automotive industry, or, and if we have those plans, please do table them with the committee. But we've heard repeatedly, including just earlier in our last panel of witnesses, that Canada is not doing a good job of that it would bring benefit both in terms of helping industry coordinate some long-term planning that they don't always have the capacity to do as they try to meet the short-term demands of their industry, but also, and I think we've seen a little bit of this today with some of the questions that get punted around, what we heard is that sometimes different government departments don't really know what their partners are working on, and so you don't get a cohesive plan emerging. So I'm curious about the philosophy behind that, whether it's a matter of resources And when the government plans to get serious about convening its interdepartmental partners and industry to really develop explicit medium and long-term plans for certain strategic industries.
And that's about 30 seconds left for an answer, if that's possible.
The short answer would be, sir, that we are collaborating very closely. We have regular communication between all the people who are here on this call. I think we're at a point of dramatic industrial transition. So helping companies understand things like net zero and understand what's necessary now is actually quite a bit different than it would have been, say, 18 months ago, because markets are progressing so fast.
With the last little bit of time that I have,
Mr.
could
Blady, you don't have any more time on my clock. Sorry about that. Mr. Hoback, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I can't believe we're having a meeting with officials and Steve Berhoul's not here. I think it's the first. So nice to see you, Mr. Forsyth, again. My first question is to Ms. Kwan. Ms. Kwan, I'm just kind of curious, the idea of clean tech, how do you define that in your department as you're applying or saying companies can qualify for your programming? What's the criteria to be considered a clean tech company here in Canada?
Thank you for that question. Of course, clean tech, as evidenced by the diverse set of witnesses that have appeared before this committee, applies to many, many different sub areas, if I can call them sub areas. Some are quite deep in their own in terms of technologies and application. It is, as we see it, across discipline, across platform, sector, if you can still limit it by that terminology. Clean tech could cover what some people call pure play, really the technology side of decarbonization of certain products or services. But it also, as we've heard, applies to the oil and gas sector, the energy sector, the mining sector, the agriculture sector, and so on and so on. Because the implications of reducing greenhouse gas is so wide and so important for us, those also are considered areas where clean technology could be applied. Now, I don't want, I'm not an expert by any means. I don't want to portray that, but there is a taxonomy for clean tech that is used when we do data and data strategies. And
okay, so then that's kind of where I'm getting at. You've got some really strong numbers on clean tech, and then I'm kind of looking at it and saying, okay, how much is that new sectors, or is that existing sectors that now qualify under a new program, so they come under a new name called clean tech, where let's say 5 years ago they might have been still doing the same thing they're doing today, but under a different type of branding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly given the evolution and the progress of the industry, we've had to adapt as well. We couldn't, of course, stay behind and see it as purely clean tech in one area versus another. And I'm thinking about aerospace, which is quite an established sector. But in aerospace, we're looking at technologies and fuels that are considered under the clean tech portfolio, amongst other things. So to your point, Mr. Hoback, yes, we are very much working to adjust and adapt to make sure that wide applications are considered.
And be like Ms. Bandayan, we only have so much time, so I don't mean to be rude.
Apologies.
Mr. Forsyth, I think this would come up under your angle, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. How does that come into any type of new programming when it comes to a border adjustment type for carbon? And where is that in global affairs is list of priorities to get something like that put in place and functioning so that Canadian companies can take advantage of Article 6?
Well, maybe I can start, and then I'll maybe turn to ECCC, my colleagues from ECCC, to fill in with respect to the Paris Accord. Certainly, as we were talking about the border carbon adjustments and are they WTO consistent, I think that we are certainly examining whether they are or whether they're not, and we'll very much we'll have to see how things roll out to determine whether they are consistent or not. But in terms of how we look at trade and our overall environment objectives, I think they they're very compatible. They work well together. We see them as very much compatible objectives in terms of whether we're at negotiating at the WTO or frankly at bilaterally with other.
Okay, and then I'll just open it up to the floor. Then Article 6, where are we at? Are we going to see progress on that?
Maybe I'll turn to ECCC for that. Thank you.
Yes, I'm happy to jump in here. So as you may be aware, Article 6 was agreed to under the Paris Agreement. However, parties to the agreement have since been negotiating further guidance on how this mechanism will work in practice with respect to nation-to-nation trading of greenhouse gas reductions or removals. So Canada is very hopeful that this will be landed by the next UN climate conference, which is taking place in November of this year. Canada has been a very active participant in the negotiations, and in particular to ensure that the international rules are robust, ensuring environmental integrity and transparency and rigorous accounting.
Thank you very much for that answer. Mr. Raya for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are directed to the representatives of Department of Industry and Department of Natural Resources. The batteries are the future. It is not just the future, it is happening now. The transportation sector is taking tremendous changes, moving from gasoline cars, from the internal combustion engines towards the battery operated vehicles.
Sorry, Christine here. Could you move your mic a little bit further from your face, please?
Okay. Madam Chair, please give me that extra few seconds. Okay. The batteries are the future. Not just the future, it has started happening currently. The transportation sector is seeing tremendous changes with the vehicles going from gasoline internal combustion engines to the battery operated electrical vehicles. And batteries are also making tremendous change in the energy storage, which will make the clean tech, the solar and wind power generation more viable in the future, not just in the future, even currently. I know that in the recent budget, we did invest to create a critical battery mineral center of excellence at Natural Resources Canada. And we also provided funds for the federal research and development to advance critical battery mineral processing and refining expertise. Canada and US, we know that we both have signed an agreement to strengthen Canada-US Joint Action Plan on critical minerals collaboration. I want to know what is happening on that front from the Canada side. United States Department of Commerce held a closed-door meeting about 8 weeks back with the miners and battery manufacturers to discuss ways to boost Canadian production of critical minerals. I think 17 of the 35 minerals identified as critical by the Department of Defense there, and most of them are also related critical minerals for the battery development can be supplied from Canada, while the United States is looking for us to be the small part of the whole overall supply chain. I feel that we should go and have a comprehensive strategy to develop everything from minerals and metals to technologies to manufacturing facilities here in Canada. So I want to ask the Department of Industry and the Department of Natural Resources, do you have a comprehensive strategy to develop this sector from minerals and metals to technologies to manufacturing companies here in Canada?
So perhaps I can start and then offer some comments from my colleague in natural resources. I'm not an expert in this space, but to assure you that NRCan, ICIIT, and Transport Canada are working very, very closely in this space. In our view, we're looking for an integrated value chain from the early production and development of minerals right through to full mobility and the production of vehicles. Canada, as you may know, is perhaps the only country in the world with the full suite of strategic minerals that are necessary for the types of battery production that we anticipate will happen in the future. and we're looking to deploy critical resources around both battery development and electric vehicle development. In fact, that's already a focus, as you probably know, in our Strategic Innovation Fund, the Net Zero Accelerator. We're hoping both of those things will progress.
When you say the integrated plan, is it available? Can you submit to the committee, please?
So there is no integrated plan. It is something we're working on collaboratively with the intent of developing an integrated approach from first development of minerals through to vehicle production.
Okay. Have you organized a meeting between NRCan, Department of Industry, and the industries themselves, the industry representative groups, in developing this particular plan?
So I can't speak specifically to that because I do not work in automobiles, but I am certain that there is regular communication by both NRCan, ICED, and Transport Canada with industry and all of these issues. And perhaps I could ask my colleagues in NRCan to speak a little bit more about the mineral side of this.
Very briefly, if you have anything to add.
Yes, I'll just say to complement, thank you, Madam Chair, with what my colleague from ICED has said. There's a very, a very whole of government approach from mines to mobility exercise that's being done, which is looking at, again, mining and processing, manufacturing, and recycling. And we're also doing a lot of work with provincial territorial governments. So there's a working group as well, which is looking at mapping out the innovation ecosystem and looking at where are some of the gaps, opportunities, some strategic areas for potential additional investments.
Thank you very much. On to Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I would like to quote, Exportation and Development Canada helps all types of businesses to succeed on the world market, recognizes that we have to uphold human rights and Canadian values. The budget of 2021 announces that they will work to increase the support offered to small and medium-sized exporters. The interpreter, sorry, but I don't have a copy of this. The government could propose some modifications to the Act on export development. More concretely, what amendments to the Act are you envisaging? Are you going to have consultations? How are you going to improve support?
Thank you for the question. I would invite our colleagues from Export Development Canada to respond. Perhaps over to you, Sophie.
I can take that part of that question, Sophie. You can complement after if you want.
Okay.
Thank you very much for the question. So we are not currently, the group here is not currently involved in changes on the Export Development Act. I can talk, however, the human rights is a top priority for EDC and has been embedded in our human rights policy that was recently issued. That was based on the United Nations Guiding Principles for Businesses and Human Rights, and through other policies and internationally recognized best practices. But I cannot speak at this point in time, what changes may be coming through the Export Development Act.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Blakey for 2.5 minutes, please.
I just wanted to come back to Mr. Noseworthy. I guess I'm curious if there's if there is a sector-specific industrial plan, or if there's a number of them. Could you table what the Canadian government considers to be its top 3 best in sector-specific industrial plans with the committee, and would one of those include clean tech?
So what we're doing on clean tech is specifically working with companies to understand their priorities. We're doing that collaboratively. We have a group across the departments that are represented here working directly with industry, talking to them about their priorities. We're asking them specifically, what are your strategic technology priorities? Where do you see key lighthouse projects that you feel will drive the industry forward? And that's the approach that we've been taking to date. So that process has really been amplified.
For any sector, is there a sector-specific industrial plan that forecasts 10 or 20 years into the future that you could table with the committee, just so we have an example of what the government considers to be best practice for sector-specific industrial policy that we could then, you know, compare the efforts on clean tech against to see where you would ideally like to end up in terms of having a medium and long-term plan?
The approach we've taken so far, at least in the number of years that I've been in government, is to focus more on how we drive specific technology areas within sectors. For example, there's been roadmaps developed by Natural Resources Canada in areas like SMR
does that mean there's like a philosophical objection to having a sector based plan in terms of where, you know, so for instance, like just as an example, we talk about the aerospace industry, like is there a philosophical objection within government to having a sector specific plan, or is it just something that we haven't actually gotten around to in any sector? And if we have got around to it in one sector, could you table that plan with the committee so we have an example of what it looks like when it's complete?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say there's a philosophical issue here, sir. I think the philosophy we sought to apply is that it's for industry to tell us what they need, not to tell them what we need.
Sure, but I mean, we've heard from a lot
Mr.
of industries
Blakey,
at this committee that they want industrial policy and to work with government to fashion it, but that's not happening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blakey. On to Ms. Gray for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Kwong, in your answer to Mr. Hoback on clean technology, you mentioned that there is a taxonomy which is used. Is that a formal document? Is that something that you'd be able to table for this committee?
I will have to check with our data strategy experts, and certainly I don't know if our CIIT colleague would be able to comment a little bit on that, but if further information is needed, we'd be happy to provide.
I think that would be really useful.
We can certainly provide it to the committee.
Thank you.
Great, thank you kindly. And this study is ending shortly, so if we could get that soon, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
We'll get that as soon as possible.
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions regarding BDC. So my understanding is that through the clean tech practice, it's intending to invest $600 million in high potential clean tech companies between 2018 and 2023. And I'm wondering how much has been invested to date. And we did hear a total, Ms. Kwan, that you had given of $370 million as of March, but I wasn't sure if that was part of this or if that was a different amount that you were giving, because you were giving a number of statistics there. So was that part of this or was that for something else?
Good afternoon. I can answer that. Yes, the number that Ms. Kwan gave was specifically related just to this $600 million clean tech fund that was given to us in the 2017 budget to exercise on a clean tech strategy specifically aimed at a stretched risk lens for early stage commercialization. So we have invested $370 million of that plan to date. We're seeing some very interesting technologies and interesting companies come out of that. And one example I'll just give to the committee members is there's a global clean tech 100 list that's published every year. It's the list of 100 best clean tech companies in globally. 11 of them were Canadian in 2021, and 7 of them are supported by BDC. So we are supporting some of the best, and we're seeing as well, every dollar that we've put into these companies, we see $4.50 of private sector money come in at the same time as us or after us. So we are seeing that our companies that we are supporting are able to leverage $4.5 more from private sectors to support their growth and commercialization.
Great, thank you. That's really good information. So when would you expect to break even? Like when do you project that the BDC will make back that $600 million, or so far with the $370 million?
So specifically to the clean tech practice, we are profitable right now on a cash-on-cash basis as well as on a non-cash basis. So we are a profitable. We do debt and equity within the fund, and right now our numbers are not finalized yet. Our year end is March 31st, but we are a profitable fund right now.
Okay, and would you be able to table for the committee any projections or documents in relating to that?
Yes.
Great, thank you. How many jobs have been created to date through the investments with BDC, specifically with this clean tech practice?
I can table that as well. I don't have that statistic with me.
Great, thank you. Would you be able to table a list which includes the total value of the loans, grants, or contributions made by the BDC any of the development agencies or granting councils to any corporation with net earnings of 10 million or greater through the clean tech practice?
So because of banker customer confidentiality, I don't think I can disclose some of the financial statements of our borrowers, but I can certainly provide in a consolidated basis some of the statistics that you're looking for, but I don't think I can do it on a customer by customer level.
Okay, thank you. And can you table with the committee the rubric you're using to evaluate the outcomes of the investments through the clean tech practice?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
The rubric, like how you're,
yes.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. Another question, completely different topic. So I know the government is laying the groundwork for potential trade agreement with Indonesia, and we'll go to who's going to speak on this. Do you see a large potential for Canadian clean tech to Indonesia?
So maybe I'll invite my colleague, Mr. Forsyth, to comment if he has any further comments in a minute. I guess just overall trade with Southeast Asia is an area that we see as high potential, particularly with some of the emerging markets and with the trade diversification strategy that I've referred to earlier. So that's Indonesia is part of that consideration, but I'll pass it over to Doug. Doug, if you have any further comments.
Sorry, Ms. Wan, I have to cut you off. On to Mr. Sarai, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to know from the trade commissioners, you have been very impactful in supporting Canadian businesses. How do you find it when you're abroad and you're promoting Canadian clean tech? What has been the response? What has been the success rates, if you can elaborate on that?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. We've been really focusing a lot of effort in promoting Canadian clean tech goods and services around the world. As I mentioned, it was important and for us to be able to renew the resources through Budget 21 and continue the support to Canadian companies in regional offices. And to your question, in our missions abroad, where our Canadian companies connect with with the trade commissioners there to learn about the local business environment, the high potential business partners, what the business risk, and get some advice on business opportunities and networks. And so far, from the resources that we've been given and from the tracking of our activities, we found that there has been success that we can point to, and also that there's continued potential for even more of that success, given the strong capacities of some of our very good companies and their technologies. Where we want to help more even is to provide that even better focus area of support to different companies across their needs. And one of the areas, I know we have limited time, but one of the areas and programs where we really provide that enhanced focus is through our Canadian technology accelerators. And we have those, we started out in the US, but now we've got some in Asia, some in Europe, some across the Americas. And we run 12-week programs, and our partners around the table, or the virtual table here, in particular BDC and EDC and others, work together with us in preparing companies and then connecting them when they're abroad, as well as, Mr. Noseworthy mentioned the wastewater mission that took place earlier to India. That also pointed to a lot of opportunities and specific ones that our Canadian companies have been able to further develop and seize upon to be able to grow their activities in international markets. So for us, it is an important area. It is an area we feel that we need to continue to support the industry on, and that we've just to give a sense, just when I'm talking about the Canadian Technology Accelerators, we've got, since 2013, the program has raised capital of over $600 million, and Canadian companies have increased revenues by 238 million, and it's created about 2,500 jobs. And so we very much look forward to continuing that. And what we've seen more recently, it was very encouraging, where we have 30% growth since 2019 in women participation in the Canadian Technology Accelerators, and that we're very pleased to see and very proud of, and so we'll continue to work in that regard as well.
Thank you. My next question is to Ms. Huddleston on the Department of Environment. Could you tell us how we're kind of collaborating with international partners to develop clean tech solutions, and probably more so on standardization? I assume when we can standardize stuff, whether it's the automotive sector, whether it's other emission standards, then a lot of our clean tech can be especially distributed to places like the United States and Europe.
So in terms of collaboration with international partners on clean tech solutions, I can speak to that from Environment and Climate Change Canada's perspective, but I think my colleagues from Global Affairs are probably better placed. From the perspective of Environment and Climate Change Canada, we do work with Global Affairs to negotiate environmental obligations in all of the free trade agreements. And that helps create new markets for clean tech solutions. Environment and Climate Change Canada also works with other partners around this table to help identify market opportunities for Canadian exporters of environmental and clean tech goods and services. And we do that by leveraging the cooperation, the relationships we have bilaterally under those free trade agreements or the companion environmental cooperation agreements. And we work closely with the Trade Commissioner Service. But I would defer to my colleagues at Global Affairs to speak more specifically to the question.
Thank you. Perhaps I can add a little bit from the Trade Commissioner Service perspective, and if others, other colleagues have additional comments, they're most welcome to join in as well. In terms of international partnerships, from a Trade Commissioner Service perspective, we, of course, are led by our Canadian companies. And what we're seeing in particular, I talked about the clean tech side, but I want to just mention also the climate finance side in terms of partnership. We're seeing multi-directional connections that are being made to be able to connect our Canadian companies to even more opportunities and more financing and capabilities around the world. So one example would be, we would have a Canadian company with a very strong capacity in a certain area, and we would help them through the network I mentioned in Europe and elsewhere. And this example is in Europe, where we helped to connect them to a Finnish international financial institution that has a project in Africa, for example. So, the traditional model of us going out to a specific market now has, as members I'm sure will appreciate, has multiple connections in an integrated, interwoven world where we feel that the benefit comes from additional connections that the Trade Commissioner Service is able to provide to create those partnerships with various agencies and organizations, including all of the partners here, of course, to be able to get our Canadian companies into new and emerging markets. So
thank you.
Thank
you very much, Ms. Kwan. I want to take a moment to thank all of the witnesses. I know it's a lot for you all to come to committee, and we just actually need 2 hours rather than an hour with all of you. So thank you all very, very much for your participation and the valuable information. And to my colleagues, it's Constituency Week next week, so I hope that you all have a successful week. Thank you for your assistance. I will now adjourn the meeting. you.